to everyone. I know we have some people joining us from all around the globe and lots of fun different time zones. We thank you for joining us, whether it's very, very early for you or very, very late. We are excited to have everyone here with us today for this first workshop for the International Network of Networks for Wellbeing in the Built Environment. I'll just take a moment to allow everyone to join before we officially kick off, and I pass it over to our organizing team to welcome you. While we wait for all the audio connections to happen from around the globe, I see lots of smiling faces. Thank you for having your cameras on and for being muted during these presentations that we're about to have. Does anyone want to wave if they think they're coming from the latest time zone? Do you think you've won? I see lots of people that are like, no, it's pretty good. All right, well, it looks like we've got most people joined. With that, I will pass it to Zhang O'Neill. She will introduce IN2WIBE and this workshop.
Hey. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on where you are. On behalf of the IN2WIBE Steering Committee, it's my great pleasure to welcome you join this workshop organized by International Network of Networks for Wellbeing in Built Environment. So this is the program sponsored by US National Science Foundation ASNET program. ASNET program director, Dr. Claire Hemingway, she will briefly talk about this ASNET program tomorrow morning. So my name is Zheng O'Neill. I'm a social professor with Mechanical Engineering Department in Texas A&M University. My current research portfolio is on the intelligent building operation, occupant central control, and well-being building environment through modeling, simulation, hardware in the loop, emulate, and real building application. So currently I'm the research chair of ASHRAE TC 7.5 technical committee, 7.5 smart building system. Today I will briefly talking about our vision and goal, and then talking about who we are, introduce our steering committee members, and then I will talk about what we do in these 3 years, and then what we have done, and then what are future activities, and briefly touch the goals for this workshop. So first, I will talk about our vision and goals. So building is, as we know, building is a system of systems. It's very complicated, several physical system. The figure in the left basically shows some key components of building environment. These include ventilation, air quality, lights, temperatures, humidity, etc. So our shared understanding is the well-being is strongly dependent on the links between the building environment and the person, cultural, and the social factors that drive the health, productivity, and comfort. The well-being in the building environment is multidisciplinary. Showing these left figures, it involves the building science, the building engineering, computer science, data science, architecture, occupant science, public health, social science, intermedicine. So our goal really is to, through this international network of network, we can connect and educate building scholars, professionals, while inform better building design, construction, operation, and use. So basically, we're talking about the whole building life cycle. So with our goals, we actually start to build this network of networks. Beside myself, we have other 5 wonderful ladies on this steering committee. I will briefly introduce them. Berchin is a professor in the Civil and Environment Engineering Department of the University of Southern California. Her works focused on understanding human building interactions in support of engineering and user objectives like safety, energy efficiency, health, and well-being in building environment. She has degrees in architect, engineer, and project management. And Teresa is a professor from School of Computing Informatics, Decision System Engineer at Arizona State University. She has affiliated appointment of professor of radiology with Mayo Clinic, College of Medicine. Her research interests are data analytics for decision support with application domains being medicine, energy. Julia is the youngest one on our team. So she is the assistant professor for the School of Computing Informatics and Decision System Engineer at Arizona State University. Julia develops her research in design and analysis of random algorithm for global optimization with a focus on improving finite time performance and scalability of these approaches. Her applications are in individual cancer care, biomanufacturing, design and control of the self-assembling RNA structure, verification of cyber-physical system. We also have another two members from the Drexel University. Jean is from the Civil Architecture and Environment Engineering Department. Her major research interests are in the smart building technology area, including occupant central control, operation, occupant behavior simulation, and the building operate relationship. She serves as the chair of ASHRAE Smart Building System Technical Committee and currently serves as a task lead for the IEC Annex 81 data-driven smart buildings. She was a Fulbright scholar. Sammy is trained as an architect and has practiced as a licensed professional HVAC engineer. She teaches architecture engineering at Drexel University and does research on building systems and how they can be harnessed to achieve an occupant luminance, acoustic, and thermal denied. So we have, besides these members on our steering committee member, we basically have 34 networks and partners from 17 countries in 5 continents, including North America, Africa, Europe, Australia, and Asia. We right now have the scholars and practitioners from building science, technology, as mentioned. Again, the well-being building environment is really multidisciplinary. So this is from public health, management and data science, and design, architecture, human building interaction, social science, system design control, and computer science. So far, we have been talking with different existing networks in different fields. For example, talking about with the people from artificial intelligence and data science and human building interaction. So we have some wonderful networks across the world join us. For example, this Alan Turing Institute in the UK, and also we have Human Central Interaction Science Technology Institute from Switzerland. And then the second field is building science and engineering, human comfort, intelligent building operations. We get support from International Energy Agency Annex, IEA Annex 79. I saw actually quite a bit of people join today's workshop from this Annex 79. We also have a group of people from Sweden, Australia, Germany, and join us. So user adapted smart building performance management system, that's nearest network. And then there's a network, a wonderful network led by UC Berkeley, thermal comfort network. And then there's a company, Arup. They have office over the different countries. And then health and well-being in buildings internal medicine also is a key subfield for well-being in building environment. So we have Well Living Map and International Well-Building Institute, and have actually this health and well-being in building environment multidisciplinary group, and then health in building roundtable HRBR from NIH. And then there's other subfield like architecture and urban design. Also have those people from public health and the social science. So what do we do? So in next 3 years, we are going to host 5 different workshops with different theme in different in different locations. So today's workshop is just the first kickoff workshop, and then in the next 3 years, we're going to have another 4 workshops which with different themes. So in each workshop, we will have 2 groups of activity. The first one is more on the scientific advancement, and the second one is professional development. And then we have designed students exchange opportunity, and then going to have exchange students, and also we're going to train the students in different institute. And we have established a YouTube channel. And so, for example, we're going to actually, if everything actually right now is resolved, we should be able to live stream this event. Also, we have our website established. And then what we have done. So in the first year, since COVID-19's impact, we basically had to cancel the 2 activities. We organized like the kickoff the meeting with the Health in Building Roundtable Conference. So that's the first activity was canceled, even we have spent quite a bit of time on there. Because those activities are canceled, we organized 2 surveys. The first one is more on the how work from home affect well-being during COVID-19. The second one is on the recent pandemic experience change professional opinions and approaches in design, construction, operation of buildings. Following these 2 surveys, we submit the 2 papers. One paper actually is already published. That's on the 10 question papers focused on health and well-being of the occupant in building during the normal operation and extreme events, including the COVID-19 pandemic. So these 10 question papers was published in the building environment. And then we are doing, we actually finished initial survey of the state of art research in health and well-being buildings. So currently drafting the papers. Our future activity, so right now actually we're doing this virtual workshop. We're organizing seminars from those IN2WIBE members. We're also going to have a live online panel discussion with the Q&A sections. And then we're also going to have another online collaboration team science workshop, which is going to be hosted between this event and the next workshop in the fall 2021. Together, we're organizing a special issue in ASME journal on well-being building environment. So hopefully we can go to that normal face-to-face workshops soon. So last thing I want to touch is the goals of the first workshop. So for today's workshop, today and tomorrow's workshop, we would like to create a roadmap for the international network of networks for well-being in building environment. We gather the expert in health science, data analytics, building science, engineering, architecture, public health, and other relevant disciplines, and want to get a convergence on the definition of the well-being in building environment. So because since right now, people is not clear when you're talking about well-being in building environment, what does it mean? We also want to identify gaps and map the future direction for the well-being in the building environment. So hopefully through today's discussion and tomorrow's discussion, we can create a roadmap and at least identify gap, and the people have a little bit more clear definition of well-being in building environment. So that's all I have. And then, so again, thank you all of you joining us today. I hope we're going to have a wonderful event. Yeah.
Thank you. And welcome to IN2WIBE, our first workshop for the International Network of Networks for Wellbeing in the Built Environment. I will share slides in just a moment. Thank you, Maggie. My name is Anne-Marie Boss. By now, you have heard a lot from me, I'm sure, over the course of the past couple weeks. I am here with my colleagues from No Innovation, or KI, as we often call ourselves, Maggie and Malachi. We are an international group of facilitators. Maggie is zooming into to all of us from Barcelona. Malachi and I are here in St. Petersburg, Florida. Together with our team, we facilitate workshops all over the world with the mission of accelerating scientific innovation. We feel very privileged to be with all of you here today to help in the process of doing just that. For this first workshop for IN2WIBE, we have a few key goals, as Zhang mentioned. First, we're going to be drawing from experts, that's you, from across disciplines, diverse disciplines spanning the field of well-being in the built environment, in order to identify those gaps and challenges that are going to give us that roadmap to a roadmap, where we've got a few hours over the course of 2 days that we're going to try and build that blueprint that will help us identify those key challenges that will be those pillars of the strategies for a future roadmap. And we want to come to a shared definition for well-being in the built environment. All the while, we hope to give all of you a chance to meet and mix and talk to as many people as possible in our breakout discussions, in the hopes that these connections continue and that these collaborations continue well beyond this 2 days. Before we get started, we'll walk you through some things to know about our shared virtual world. The first one being we are recording. This recording will be available to you after the workshop. In the breakouts, you will not be recorded. This will be a time for you to have free discussion of ideas and the challenges that you face in each of your fields without thinking about the recording. Lots can happen in our virtual world, and we are here to help you. If you've logged into KaiStorm, you'll see our help desk highlighted at the bottom of the screen of the menu. Please visit the help desk for any tech needs that you have, or you can chat Malachi here in Zoom, and he will help you as well. We acknowledge that working from home is a unique experience, and we get it. If you have a kid cameo or a door knock, we completely understand. She's under strict instructions to stay away, but there's always the chance that you will meet my dog Rue by the time this workshop ends. And on that note, suffering is optional. If you need to step away, please do so at your discretion. We have a break built in at the midway point each day, but if you need to step away at any time in the meantime, please monitor that for yourselves. Sometimes it may feel like this. In order to stay on schedule, there will be times where we will have to interrupt your conversations, and we apologize in advance for this. Sometimes it will feel like you're being herded uphill between KaiStorm and Zoom. We'll be moving you around a lot in the course of the next 2 days, and hopefully it will start to feel more natural as the workshop progresses. These are the platforms that we'll be using. You are here with us in Zoom. Yay, you made it. Hopefully you joined us via KaiStorm. If you didn't, or if you have not logged into KaiStorm, my team will drop that link in the Zoom chat now. Please go ahead and click into that and be logged into KaiStorm for the duration of this workshop. That's where we're going to be getting everything done. On this slide, you'll see a few other of our tools. We'll be using virtual Post-it notes. You see some of the access buttons that will be on the pages as we progress through the workshop. I'll speak more about KaiStorm when we do our walkthrough in a few minutes. We recommend having a split screen. So right now my screen looks like you see on the slide. I've got Zoom on one side and KaiStorm on the other. This, for ease of experience in the workshop, we recommend having both up at the same time so that you can be with us in Zoom and working in KaiStorm. About the time. We will always start on time and we will do our best to stick to the schedule. Any agenda when it meets human contact is subject to change, but we will do our best to adhere to it. If you could help us by please continuing to be on time, that will be very helpful in the course of the workshop. So who's here? Earlier, you met our organizing team. They've been working hard with us facilitators to put this workshop together for you. I've introduced Malachi and Maggie, our facilitation team. Along with all of you, our participants, we have our scribes, moderators that will be in your breakouts. Silent Zoom clap for all of our scribe and moderator volunteers. They will be helping us to capture, yes, thank you. They will be helping us to capture all of the insights that you have in our discussions that we'll be having throughout the 2 days. With that, I'm going to pass it to Maggie to take us through some tips for the workshop.
Happy to help walk through some of that. Yes. It's not very hard, and yet there are a few things that you can pay attention to make sure you get the most of this workshop. So first of all, turn on your camera. So what we know is that we're in this Zoom space, and if we see a lot of blanks or just your name, it doesn't really feel like we're in a workshop together. So if you put your camera on, it really helps us to feel like we're in a meeting together. Now we realize that suffering is optional, that for some people, you may not feel comfortable having your background show, or maybe there's somebody back there, or maybe you're far away and you're using data and that's expensive. So suffering is optional, you don't have to, but whenever you can, would you please let us see who you are. We want to see you. We know that many of you come from different fields. We've invited people from different disciplines on purpose. And in each one of your disciplines, you have your own language, your own vocabulary, your terms and acronyms and a little bit of jargon sometimes perhaps. We invite you to think about this notion of speaking with each other like intelligent lay people, so that you might be mindful of some of the jargon that you might use. And if you do need to use some of the terminology that is specific to your field, just check in with the people who you're speaking with to make sure that they understand it the same way you do. I know we ran a workshop once about it was called the maths of life, and there were mathematicians and biologists, and we realized halfway through that they were thinking about vector in entirely different terms. So it's really important to check in on those language issues. So we're big fans of capturing your output. It's so easy to have a great thought or a great comment and to lose it because you didn't write it down. So we invite you while you're listening to the speakers to take notes. If we were in a workshop room together, there'd be a pile of Post-it note tabs on the table and a bunch of Sharpie pens, and we'd be urging you to make notes. Maybe you have some Post-it notes handy on your desk, or if not, a journal, a notebook, some paper. Make notes of the things you think that stand out so that when we move you into discussion, you'll be able to remember what were the highlights of things that you've heard. Now, once you get into discussion, we have organized some scribes to take care of some of that capture. So you can relax there a little bit. Nonetheless, there will be times when we ask you to use Post-it notes as well. And just a quick word on that, whenever we are using our virtual Post-it notes, because we love Post-it notes so much, it's always one thought per Post-it. It's so interesting how in this digital age, everything seems to creep in on us. And if we couldn't have brought you away to one room, conference room, there might be a few distractions, but more or less you'd be with us. And yet here in your own office or your own living room, There are all sorts of creeping messages and needs and desires from other people, but we wonder, would you be willing to treat this as a precious opportunity to connect with other people who are interested in this program and to be present with us? So to close all of your browsers except for the one that has KaiStorm, and keep the Zoom window open, but otherwise close things, turn off notifications, shut down your mail client, and pretend as though we really are together in the room so that we can have that feeling of having a very productive conversation without too many distractions. We'd appreciate it. And number 5 is about suspending judgment. This is critical that we say suspend judgment. It's not that we don't want you ever to use your discrimination and your ability to make determinations, but while we're listening to each other, could you please think about suspending it? Pretend there's a switch in the back of your head, just like this slide, and set it aside so that you can give space and time for new ideas and new notions to emerge. It takes a lot of energy to have an opinion. And we'd rather have you spend that energy listening generously to each other, considering new options, considering other challenges, considering other points of view. And so whenever you can, to say yes and instead of yes but, and the yes and is really like, I think what's really critical about suspending judgment is just because you don't verbally, actively disagree with someone doesn't necessarily mean you agree. It just means that you're considering what they have to say and taking it on board. I think those are the main tips. I'm going to stop sharing now and let Anne-Marie give you a little tour of KaiStorm and how we're going to use it today.
Thank you so much, Maggie. By now, most of you are probably in KaiStorm, and you've probably had a chance, hopefully, to buzz around and see what we've got in there. I'm going to take us through some key pages. Here you have our left-hand page menu where you can click between. Right now, I'm on the welcome page. I'm just going to note a few key things here. One, hopefully you joined Zoom from this page. This button up in the top left-hand corner will be here for you throughout the workshop to join us in the Zoom. It will be there tomorrow morning to join us in the Zoom. One other thing I'll note on the welcome page is our Slack workspace is linked here. And Malachi, could you drop the link to our Slack in the chat? If you have not joined our Slack workspace, please go ahead and do so now. This is where we'll be communicating between the 2 days of the workshop and beyond. Our agenda with timings is here, and again, time is relative. You'll see Maggie, Malachi, and I have a version of the agenda, a quick look behind us. We'll be going into presentations in just a little bit. And then in between presentations, we'll go into small group discussion breakouts to capture those insights around the key gaps and challenges after each presentation. We'll have a break, one more presentation, and another breakout to capture more insights around the categories. We'll have a networking at the end. Day one, you can think of as diverging. We're going to be coming up with lots of gaps and challenges. And in day two, we're going to narrow in on our shared definition and on which key gaps and challenges and those categories that we want to focus on in our blueprint for IN2WIBE going into the future. This speakers page is something to note during our speaker presentations. On each speaker's page, you have the ability to leave them a question. Down here in the right-hand corner, you'll see this green circle with a plus sign. If you click that and type your question and then click this arrow, it will post. This is what we'll be monitoring for our Q&A after each presentation. We have just a little bit of time for Q&A, so we'll be moderating the questions and reading them to the speakers. But please leave your questions here on this KaiStorm page for us to give to them. And if we don't get to your question for the networking at the end, the speakers can be reviewing them for things that they might want to talk about during those discussions at the end of the day. I'll just note one last thing here in KaiStorm. I mentioned our help desk earlier, but this is what it looks like. It has the same post-it feature, so when you type in a technical issue, it'll come out red and we'll know that there's a new issue for us to address. You'll know that one of us is dealing with it when we turn it yellow, and when it's resolved, it'll be green and we can all cheer. So please visit the help desk for any tech needs that you have. Before we move into our speakers, I will bring us to our poll. Malachi is going to drop, oh, I'm sorry, Maggie, would you like to take us through the poll? Okay.
It's really fine. Yeah, so we wanted to hear from you going into it. We've got some interesting definitions already that were given to us on KaiStorm when you first registered. And we thought it'd be interesting now just to hear from you, well, what might be 3 words that for you describe what it means to be well-being in the built environment. So Malachi has just put into the chat a link. We encourage you to click through very quickly. It will open up a new tab in the browser you have open with KaiStorm. That's the only other thing you're allowed to open besides KaiStorm and Zoom. And please just take a moment to type in 3 words that you think at this moment, coming fresh into this experience, are the 3 key words that mean well-being in the built environment.
We'll go ahead and give everyone a moment to do that. In the meantime, I will stop sharing. And while everyone is typing in those 3 keywords, Dr. Esther Sternberg, would you like to get ready to screen share? Oh, thank you. Sorry, I moved away from my Zoom for just a moment. Okay, if everyone has filled in the poll, I will kick it to Dr. Esther Sternberg. She is the director of the Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine. I will invite her to fully introduce herself, and I will pass it over now.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you, Zheng, for inviting me to be part of this really exciting workshop. I'm a physician. I'm research director for the Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine and director of the University of Arizona Institute on Place, Wellbeing, and Performance. Prior to coming to the University of Arizona in 2012, I was a senior scientist and section chief at the National Institutes of Health and have worked for 20 years or more with the U.S. General Services Administration, with Kevin Kampshire and his team at the GSA to develop ways to measure the impact of the built environment on health, well-being, and performance using wearable devices, both environmental and health devices. So my focus is coming from the biomedical or biopsychosocial medical focus, and mainly from the integrative medicine, integrative health focus. And I'll explain to you what that is. I believe I have 10 minutes to speak. Mm-hmm. So our charge, as you have heard, is to develop a definition of well-being in the built environment. And in order to do that, we have to consider the many layers of health and well-being. And there are many layers. There are many layers to health, and there are many layers to the environment. And all of these interact constantly, continuously, at every moment of our waking and sleeping lives. You can think about health from the genome, that is your genes, from the proteome, that is the proteins that your genes make, the metabolome, that is the way that your body metabolizes everything, from the physiological level, from the point of view of stress, stress and the relaxation response, from the behavioral, physical activity, for example, from the psychosocial. And all of these things interact, all of these aspects of health and well-being interact with every single aspect of the environment, from materials and greenery, light, views, noise, sounds, the layout of the environment, architecture at all scales, the individual building, the urban scale, landscape scale, and all of the ways that the comfort aspects of the environment impact us: humidity, temperature, air chemistry, and airflow. So you can think of health and well-being in the built environment as we're always walking around with this stack of environmental exposures that impact every aspect, from molecules to psychosocial, in our health and well-being. This is another way to think about health in the built environment, in the healthy workplace. And I want to call out Altaf Engineer, our curriculum lead for health in the built environment at the University of Arizona Institute on Place, Wellbeing, and Performance, for helping me create this slide. You notice that I've put air quality at the bottom. The reason I put air quality at the bottom is it's in the foundation. Without clean air, without healthy ventilation systems that get rid of volatile organic compounds and particulates and allergens and viruses, we cannot have health and well-being in the built environment. So that's the foundation. But health and well-being in the built environment is so much more. It includes all the aspects of what we see and hear and smell and touch and do in the environment that help enhance well-being, enhance not only physical health, but cognitive health, psychological health, behavioral health, and social health. So there's another way to look at health and well-being, especially in the built environment, and that is through the lens of integrative health. So what is integrative health? Andrew Weil, who's the founder and director of the Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine here in Tucson, Arizona, actually coined this term, integrative health. Originally, integrative health was thought to be complementary and alternative medicine, sort of mind-body medicine, ancient practices that help enhance well-being. But really what integrative health is it incorporates all these ancient practices together with modern approaches to medicine. And there are 7 domains of integrative health. This is from the Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine's My Wellness Coach app. There's a link there so that you can actually go on that app and use it to enhance all these different domains of your own integrative health. Sleep, resilience, which is stress and relaxation response, the environment, which I'll be talking about more, movement, so exercise, social relationships, spirituality, and nutrition. And the built environment can and enhance and certainly impacts every one of these aspects of integrative health. And this is a summary of the way I look at how the built environment enhances or can actually impair each of these different aspects of integrative health. I'm not going to go through all of them because of in the interest of time, but I'll just talk about one, how the built environment can actually stress or calm. And there are many aspects of the built environment that stress: noise, light, too much light, too little light, glare, temperature and humidity, too much or too little, crowding, odors, foul odors, and mazes. And there are elements of the built environment that can calm: sound, nature sounds, quiet music, light. I see that I'm getting the hook. I won't go through all of those. In our studies with the GSA, we were able to show that retrofitting a building with these kinds of integrative aspects in mind actually reduced stress of the environment. And in the interest of time, I will not go through that. There are ways to design the built environment.
Esther, that was a mistake. It was not a stamp. So please, you do have time left. So I don't want to rush you too much.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. So how much time do I have left?
We have about 3 minutes left.
Wow. Okay. Well, maybe I can go back to this. In our studies with the GSA, we actually used wearable devices to measure the impact of the built environment on 4 federal buildings, including the GSA headquarters. And we found that open office design resulted in 32% increase in physical activity compared to private offices, and 20% more physical activity in cubicles compared to private offices. And that resulted in 14% less stress at night when the people went home. 14% less stress every single night cumulatively is a physiologically and medically relevant amount of reduction in stress. So the built environment really can impact aspects of health and well-being that are important for both physical health and emotional health and resilience. Now, this is the open office design that we talked about. Really, it's more active office design with bench seating and lots of different choices of places to go and to gather. Places to gather also support social support. So the GSA has incorporated these guidelines into their sustainable facilities tool. You can go to that if you're interested in looking at their recommendations. And all of this has been turned on its head by COVID. We had wanted people to gather closely. Now we have to consider spatial layout for distancing. Of course, ventilation and filtration are important. Access to the outdoors and outdoor spaces are extremely important, and other aspects of relevant to reducing viral spread. But that doesn't mean that you can't still incorporate the various elements that are important for physical health and emotional well-being, and look at it through the lens of integrative health to support all of these aspects of the built environment. So you asked me to mention challenges. The challenges in doing research for this kind of outcomes, for well-being outcomes, not only physical aspects, but well-being, sleep, biophilia, love of nature, spiritual aspects. How do we enhance meditation, nutrition? All of these are hard to quantitate from a scientific point of view. It's much easier to quantitate the impact of a virus on a disease, much easier to quantitate the impact of an allergen or a volatile organic compound on an illness than it is to quantify the impact of circadian light and views to nature on health and well-being. And so that's one of the challenges. It also costs a lot of money to do that. We need to find ways to develop quantitative aspects of return on investment for enhancing well-being. It costs a lot of money to put a larger window that has views to nature and that does not absorb too much heat when it's in 110 degrees in the summer in the desert, for example. So these are the challenges that I see in our field, but they can be overcome. And I welcome a discussion in the small breakout groups to see what other challenges people have experience. This is my team here, multidisciplinary, multi-college team at the University of Arizona, and these are some of the supporters of our research.
Great. Esther, thank you so much for the wonderful but short presentation. We all appreciate how difficult it must be to put all this information in 10 minutes. Thank you for that. So we have several questions in Storm. I'm not sure if we have time to answer all of them, but I'm going to ask one very specific question relating to the GSA project. How did you quantify the stress in the GSA project, and how did you specify where the stress source is from?
Thank you very much for that question. So we used wearable devices as well as experience sampling. So we had both subjective and objective ways to measure the stress response. So with wearable devices, we used a chest-worn device that is based on electrocardiogram, EKG, and that measures the variability between the beats. And with an algorithm, you can come out with, this is a 30, 40-year field where one of our collaborators, Julian Thayer, is one of the pioneers in this field for heart rate variability. So heart rate is the number of beats per minute. The variability between the beats depends upon your vagus nerve, your breathing, your relaxation response. So the more variable the spaces between the beats, the more your relaxation response is in control. The less variable, the more your stress response is in control. So that was one way that we measured stress. We also were able to use algorithms to extrapolate sleep quality from that, and physical activity and posture. The most recent study was Well Built for Well-Being. I'm happy to share the publications that have come and are continuing to come out from that. Clearly, the other way to measure stress is to ask questions. So this is a well-established method in psychology. It's called experience sampling. We sent questionnaires to the smartphone of the participants. This was 272 participants in 4 federal buildings. We had a follow-on study with IARPA and Lockheed Martin, where we did the same thing with 600 participants over a period of 6 weeks. Those who are interested, by the way, these data sets are being made publicly available for people to access and analyze in whatever way you want, linking to the built environment. So we used big data analytics to link the different aspects of health and well-being and performance and physical activity and stress to the different aspects of the built environment that we measured. We worked with a company called Aclima in the Bay Area that we were able to measure up to 11 different environmental attributes: light, sound, volatile organic compounds, carbon dioxide, and so on, in the natural office setting. And through big data analytics, link both the subjective and objective measures of stress and relaxation to these different aspects of the built environment, including spatial layout.
Thank you. Do we have time for one more question? Great. So I'm going to ask this question. Many study the effect of one factor on health, like light on sleep. But how do we measure integrative built environment effects on integrative health?
And this is exactly what we did with the GSA study. That's an excellent question. There are 2 ways to do this kind of research. One, you can do an interventional study where you keep everything controlled except changing one thing like light or carbon dioxide or sound, and then measure one aspect of health. But that's not really how we experience the built environment. So the way we carried out these studies is through what we call naturalistic studies in situ, in office spaces. It can be done in schools, it can be done in any physical environment. And you use big data analytics in order to tease out which aspects of the built environment are related. You don't go in with a hypothesis and say, I'm going to look at light. You go in and say, which of the many things that the person is exposed to are related to which of the many aspects of the health and well-being that we're measuring. So what came out from this is that actually, as I said, the physical layout of the office space correlated with physical activity, stress, and then sleep in a connected way.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think we are up with time. Anne-Marie?
Yes, thank you, Esther, and thank you, Burton, for moderating for us. We hate to cut into Q&A, but we want to allow you to get into your small groups to have those discussions and capture insights from Esther's presentation. There will be another opportunity to speak with our presenters at the end of the day. Please continue to capture questions on the speaker pages, and they can go and look at those and have them in mind during those discussions. for moving into our breakouts. First thing, we'll do introductions. We need to keep these quick. So we recommend what we call the one breath introduction. Maggie, could you model this for us?
Sure. My name is Maggie Dugan, and despite studying Russian history in college and working in broadcasting for a dozen years, when I discovered the field of deliberate creativity, I knew that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to become a facilitator of workshops around creativity and innovation, and I started working with No Innovation in the mid-aughts, and I live in Barcelona, and that's one breath.
Perfect, thank you. So after you've done your one breath introductions, you'll discuss new thinking you may have around the challenges or gaps in the field of well-being in the built environment. Did the presentation you just heard inspire any new thinking around challenges or gaps in the speaker's field or your own field? Our scribes will be with you in the breakouts to capture on our challenge capture page the top 5 or so key gaps and challenges that you discuss as a group. And I'll pass it to Maggie for one more tip around reframing these gaps and challenges into opportunities to invite solutions.
Let me do that. You know, we often talk about problems, and they often are sort of heavy. There's a period at the end of the sentence. You know, we can't find enough funding. We can't get enough students to do this. We can't get enough of that. My husband loads the dishwasher inappropriately. I mean, these are all complaints that we have. But if we want to reframe them in the form of a question, it changes everything. It turns it into an invitation to solve the problem. And the way we do that is just by adding a few words, how might we or how to, just in the front. And it totally turns around. And it's not about being a Pollyanna on everything. These are challenges, these are problems we have, but it's about using language that inspires other people to help you solve the problem rather than to go, oh, there we are talking about what's wrong again. So in your discussions now, we're going to be inviting you to talk about gaps and challenges. And as much as possible, if you can think about using that language, well, how might we and how to, and in what ways might we, you might find that it will inspire other challenges in a productive way and help you to, lay out the groundwork for answering those challenges when you move through the process. Anne-Marie, anything else you'd add?
Just a note for our scribes that the capture page for challenges and gaps is yellow in the KaiStorm menu. That is where you'll be posting the post-its for your group and capturing those 5 or so new challenging gaps that you discuss. We'll have about 30 minutes in this breakout before we pull you back to plenary for our next presentation. Malachi, how are we looking on breakout groups?
I think we're looking good on breakout groups.
Okay, well, with that and the magic of Zoom, we will put you into your breakout groups. Does everyone understand our next activity? Are we all good? All right, awesome. Please enjoy, and we will see you in about 30 minutes.
Yes, so, I was asked to speak about my personal definition of well-being in the built environment. And I stressed the word personal because that's what it said, and then challenges. And I guess my first challenge is I don't have a personal definition. So we can go to the next slide. And while I don't have a personal definition, I do have a dictionary, which I haven't used in years. I had to find it and take a picture of it. But if I did have a definition, it would be engineering based, because that's my background, in terms of the research I've done over my career. I don't do health research. So it would be engineering based. It would be focused on ventilation and indoor air quality, because that's what I know. But what it wouldn't be is a list of indoor airborne contaminant concentrations, because we really don't have that for the non-industrial environment. It would not be a list of contaminant limits, and it would definitely not be, have carbon dioxide at the top of that list. That's another 10-minute presentation. We really don't have a good operational definition of good indoor air quality. We know what bad indoor air quality is, high carbon monoxide, high particulate levels, moldy surfaces and spores going into the air, but we really don't have a good definition of good indoor air quality. So I'm punting on my personal definition. But in looking at some of the background material and thinking about this, it reminds me of, maybe 40 years ago when people started talking about smart buildings and intelligent buildings, and advanced technology office buildings was something that we heard a lot about decades ago. And when those came up, I asked myself, well, what about unsmart buildings? The one they call it smart and it's got all this whiz bang technology, that's great. But what about the other buildings? And how do you keep these buildings smart? People get smarter as they get older. At least that's been my experience so far. I don't know how long that's going to last. But how do you keep a building smart? It's not going to do it on its own. And so that kind of brings me to some of my challenges, which is the next slide. First is existing buildings. The vast majority of the buildings of the future are already standing, they're already occupied. This building, actually, I found this picture of. This building is no longer standing, but most buildings of tomorrow are already up. So what are we going to do about those? It's a lot easier, to design a clever new building with all sorts of these great capabilities, but dealing with existing buildings is tough, based on, what you start with and the technology that's available and who's going to pay for them. So I think we need to talk about existing buildings for sure. And then, wellness or any other, label you put on a building, does not free you from the unglamorous details, also known as nuts and bolts. And I went out with my camera and took a picture of some nuts and bolts yesterday. These unglamorous details, they include things like commissioning. You can design a building and a great system and install it, but you got to make sure it's running properly, and that isn't going to happen by itself. And then through the life of the building, you have to, spend some time and money and people on operating the building and maintaining it. That's not going to happen on its own either, automatically. And it's not always the highest item on the budget, is to do this mundane stuff, to calibrate sensors, to change filters, to, take a look inside the air handler every now and then to make sure that you don't have standing water and other forms of muck, growing in the building. And this stuff has to happen. Too often, and then I won't pin this on any kind of wellness focus, but too often the money goes into marble and artwork in the lobby, not for changing filters. So I think that's a real challenge, is dealing with this nuts and bolts stuff, these nuts and bolts reality of operating buildings. If I was a rich man, I wouldn't buy my alma mater a library. I would buy it the Andy Pursley Memorial filter changing program. And that's really it. I'm surprising myself that I'm not rambling past the 10-minute limit, but hopefully the organizers don't mind a little free time, and also hopefully this will stimulate a little discussion. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks for your help, Maggie.
Just a reminder to post your questions for Andy on his speaker page. That is where we'll be moderating from for questions.
But you're going to pull those questions together, or do I need to?
Yes, Burton will be watching the speaker
Yes.
page for you. They're starting to come in now.
Yes. And then we have one question. So how to connect the operation improvement with well-being?
Well, I mean, the connection seems pretty direct. You're not, you might have well-being, kind of in theory before the building's occupied, and pat yourself on the back and, have a little reception, but you're not going to maintain well-being or well anything without, doing the maintenance work, because over time, the system performance will degrade. Sensors will go out of calibration, dampers will break, all sorts of bad things happen. It's inevitable. So you will not, maintain wellness or any other of your goals, without the maintenance. Now how to connect it operationally and convince people that's the thing to do, that's the challenge. That's tough.
We have another question. Can you imagine a way in which the continued health of a building is mandated? And does this involve a different way of financing buildings?
Yeah. A mandate, in my mind, is kind of like a government body saying you got to do it, right? And having enforcement, probably more likely to, achieve success by thinking about motivation, motivating people to do it. Economically is probably a good way to go, but mandating is pretty tough. I would kind of focus on, on motivating people to do good things through, I don't know, that's policy stuff, economic incentives and other types of programs.
Another question, Andy, you talked about unsmart buildings. So this is related to that. For existing buildings that are not designed for adaptability, how can we ensure new strategies of efficiency and well-being? How can we ensure new strategies of efficiency and well-being are being incorporated?
Right. I mean, that's a challenge, is how do you, if we had all the answers for new buildings, how do you get them into, existing buildings? And I don't really have the answer to that. I think it's something we need to, I guess my answer is we've got to think about it if we want to get there, because the turnover rate for new buildings is just so low, that if we do every new building perfectly, it's going to be a long, long time before we benefit from that perfection.
Maybe we move this one to the challenge list. So next question, every building will perform differently. So what sort of maintenance, upgrade criteria or regulations do you see being effective? What kind of research studies might inform this?
Well, regulations is tough for existing buildings, at least in the US. We have building codes and we have inspections and code officials. They come out, they look at the building before it's built or as it's being built or before it's occupied. And then they say, okay, this building's good. It complies with the regulations for construction. And they give it a certificate of occupancy and it's over, unless there's a major renovation. So we don't do regulation of existing buildings very well, whether it's maintenance or whatever. So that's part of the challenge of existing buildings. Research, that's pretty broad scope. Research to show the benefits, but of good maintenance and operations. Some people are doing that. Research to provide the data to support the economic argument. That'd be useful. And there's some database I think ASHRAE's been involved in looking at the costs of building operation and maintenance to make that case. So what is it cost benefit? It's getting the data, to try to convince people to spend the money. And we talked about this at our breakout. A lot of building decisions are based on first costs, not life cycle costs. And if you base them on life cycle costs, you'll make different decisions, but you need, those kind of data, to support those decisions, to get the people with the money to spend it.
Great. I'm assuming we have more time. A short practical question. Do you have any recommendations on low-cost indoor air quality devices?
No, I don't. I haven't involved in any tests of them. I will say, I see them for sale and hear of people buying them, and I don't know exactly what you do with it. You know, you put it on your coffee table. When you used to have friends over, you know, for cocktails, you'd look at it and you'd point to it and it would turn red and the lights would flash. I don't really quite understand, you know, what you do with that information. But so I don't have any recommendations for specific devices, and I think I need to understand why and what you're going to do with these better than I do currently. I don't have one.
That's okay, quite okay. So one last question. I'm going to read the end of this question. Do you think tech-driven approach is the right way to accomplish intelligent, smart building environments?
Which approach? I'm sorry.
Tech-driven, technology-driven.
Oh. I haven't thought much about that. I mean, I guess the technology, what you can do, has to drive it to some degree, but you know, it's got to fit into the larger, you know, context of, you know, of the economics and how the building is managed. You know, you don't want to be a solution looking for a problem, right? You know, you got to understand the context, adapt the technology or to develop the technology so it fits in. You know, otherwise it's going to be another widget sitting on the shelf that everyone's excited about and then unplugged and how it's gathering dust. So.
Great, thank you so much, Andrew. I think we're gonna move on to the next step in our agenda.
Thank you. Yes, just before we move to our next speaker, Jay, just a couple of notes. We are live streaming now. So just so everyone knows, we are on the live stream. We can drop the link to the live stream in the chat if someone from my team wants to do that. And if you'd like to share with any friends or colleagues, they can watch us live. And on that note, between speakers, we're going to do some calisthenics, some in-chair calisthenics. Yes, now that we're live streaming especially, but just to make sure we're engaged, go ahead and throw those shoulders back, roll them back, deep breath, whatever stretch feels right.
It's like those exercises we do in the airplane. Remember airplanes, you know? And in the pocket, they pull out and there's those stretches where you move your feet in circles and you lift your knees. So you can still do energy in your seat to keep the blood moving, keep yourself alert.
And while we're finishing stretching, Dr. Jay Zhao, if you would like to begin your screen share.
Do you see it?
Yes, thank you. I will allow you to introduce yourself, the Executive Vice President and Head of Delos Labs at Delos.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation and the great organization. My name is Jay Zhao. I work for this company called Delos. We're a health and wellness company. You may have heard one of our products, which is called the Well Building Standard. They're being ministered, so we are the parent company of the International Well Building Institute. That's an administer and updating and managing this well building standard. So today I'd like to talk about our perspective, industry's perspective on the definition of well-being in the built environment. Okay, moving on. Okay. So as a health and wellness company, we defined these terms internally in our company because we want to be accurate and to speak the same language consistently. They are loosely used interchangeably by a lot of people, especially in industry, not as rigorous in academia. So we did this exercise in our company a while back. So I'm not going to go into the details and reading these words, but what I want to point out is to be aware, health, well-being, and wellness are three different terms. They have different definitions, different scope, and impacts different things of a human. So I'm going to zoom in to the well-being portion of that. So note that the definition here on well-being is not about well-being in the built environment. It's about general well-being of a human being. So I think there are different aspects of it, but for the purpose of this exercise of defining the term well-being in the built environment, I think we can draw connections of the built environment with all 5 aspects of this definition one by one. For example, the first is the broad definition, a person's attitude or subjective perception towards their physical, mental, and social conditions. That's the definition of well-being. But if we scope it within the built environment, I guess that's relationship. The second one is about a scale and characteristics of these things. Again, I think the built environment has impact on all of those aspects. It can be the cause and can also be the risk factor to the cause to having these impact, happiness or health status. Factors, how to measure, and it changes. It's a dynamic term. So that's the definition we learned and we adapted from a well-cited psychology study. The second question being asked was, what's the challenge? So put it very simply, from our industry's perspective, we always get asked, as a company, we sell stuff, and we always got asked about three questions. Why do I need to pay? Why? So that's basically the quantification of ROI, the benefits, the impact, all of those things. Note that the ROI, return on investment, that's on the financial term, on economic terms. That's different from the impact, meaning social impact, environmental impact, and other impact to the society. These two terms are very different in today's industry or today's business world because of the popularity of ESG and other framework of social impact, environmental impact, now public health impact. So that's the first question we always get asked, why? The second question is, why should I pay, right? Who's paying? It can be something within an organization. Should it be paid by sustainability department, or by HR department, or where's the budget from? So that's another more detailed. And then the third one would be how to quantify these ROI and impact over longer term, because you can sell them one thing for 1 year, but what about continuously? Are they a returning customer? Are they continuing with the service or the products for a long run? So these are the things we have to deal with day in, day out. So the next chapter will be, what are the steps to take to address these challenges? So as I mentioned before, one of our most famous product is the WELL building standard. So I want to use this as an example. How do we address these questions? So we developed the well-being standard in 2014. We launched in 2014, and the goal of well-being standard is for the people's health and well-being. Again, it's for the people's health and well-being. Buildings are a vehicle, from our perspective, to making people healthier. Building is not the end product. Our end goal is for people to be better. With that, and the reason is simple, we spend 90% of our times within the built environment, and that's why we chose buildings as a vehicle. But it's also because from public health perspective, physical and social environment has the largest share on the determinants of health. This graph is a bit outdated from CDC. The new CDC diagram shows more breakdowns, but if you summarize, it's basically majority of our health is determined by physical social environment. Your buildings, your neighbors, your communities, where do you go to school, plus your healthy behavior or lifestyle. The typical medical care and genomics, which we spend as a society in the United States, we spend majority of our money when we talk about health is on fixing problem on healthcare versus preventing problems by giving you better lifestyle or better health, physical and social environments. So that's another reason why, right? And from the business perspective on investments, this is the typical breakdown of how business spends their money. Majority of the money is spent on people, on hiring, on salary, on benefits. Note that 1% on energy, it doesn't make energy less important because this is only on first investment or only on immediate money term. This doesn't count carbon, doesn't count climate change. When we think about climate change and how does that impact us in longer term as a society, energy can be much more impactful than our human being short-term health from policy perspective. And well, as a system, as a framework, we considered the building design aspect, the operations of the building, but also the company policy perspective and the individual behavior perspective. How these three things holistically can impact people from health and well-being perspective. And this is the breakdown of the so-called standards. I would say it's a rating system. Air, water, light, thermal, sound, material. These are all the physical, environmental aspect of things. Nourishment, movement, mind, and community is more on the individual behavior and company policy and operations perspective. So the standards or this documentation and the background research, the citations, all the things we used to support this rating system is all open to public. It's on the website. You can go just search well-being standard. You can find all the documentation there, even the slides. So now let's go to the next question, which is what are the benefit? What are the ROI benefit or the impact benefit? So there are a lot of studies we've done on case studies, individual buildings, individual communities, but I want to highlight one thing, which is the engagement. For most companies today, universities as well included, especially in the OECD countries, they offer some sort of wellness and health benefit as this type of thing to attract talents. But the key problem for anyone to change their behavior or to adopt something that's new is engagement. How do we give people something they can continuously use, especially if that thing takes effort for people? So that's the active behavioral change engagement dilemma any wellness company is facing today. What we believe the built environment is a huge advantage is you don't need to do anything if you want to be healthier inside of four walls and the roof and the floor, because the space is there. If the space is healthier for you, you just being in there and you're being impacted by it. So you don't need to actively running. You don't need to eat only vegetables. You don't need to do all the things that takes efforts to change your behavior and lifestyle. Built environment passively impacts you all the time. So that's the adoption rate problem we're addressing here. So as a result, I think since 2015, these numbers shows how we developed since 2015. Now the standards or other programs, it covers 82 countries, more than 15,000 buildings, 1.5 billion square foot real estates. Is being impacted every single day. And the customers around the world, including 70 of them Fortune 500. So this does not mean we're done. This is the beginning of it. We are defining our goals, why we're doing this. We have the framework. It's not perfect, but it's something. But the biggest challenge moving forward is how to achieve it, which I highlighted on the title here, human-building interactions. We believe this adopting, we discussed this in the breakout room. How can we learn from the technology companies today and learn how they use theories of behavioral economics to attract teenagers to watch silly videos every day, but use the same technology and mindsets to benefit human health and well-being in the built environment. That's something we believe is critical. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. We have great questions here. I'll start with the first one. For the 15% of people that participate in corporate wellness offerings, are those people that would have already been able to manage their wellness, or does it help lift those with the lowest wellness practices? I'm asking this question from an equity and inclusion point of view.
That's a great question. First of all, the company that can offer any wellness program would be at least beyond the lower socioeconomic class. And that's for one. Secondly, the people who are actively adopting the healthier lifestyle, all of those things, they're aware of that, are mostly, I don't have data here, but they're mostly are well-educated. I'm sure their income level and socioeconomic status is, again, above the average with even within the company. So I don't think a general wellness programming offered by employers would solve the equity problems. But I also don't think it's going to make it worse, because making awareness is the first step. I think we discussed about education on children, on next generations. I think awareness is the key. And only if more people are understanding how built environment is important to people, that's only that, then we can talk about behavior change and doing other things. So one example we discussed in the breakout room was it takes a pandemic for people to realize how ventilation is important to your health for average consumer, right? Now they're all aware of the word aerosol. I think most people in the world now knows that word, or at least heard of it from the news. So those type of awareness is what we need. But hopefully don't take another pandemic or other disaster for us.
Thank you. Do we have time for one more question? Okay, one more. If well-being changes over time, what does that mean in terms of adapting, designing buildings to ensure well-being in buildings?
What's the first part?
If well-being changes over time.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think I've thought about it before. I think well-being changes over time means well-being can be impacted. It doesn't mean the threat, well, it means the threshold can move higher and higher or lower and lower, depending on where you are or what are the factors you are being exposed to. But I believe because of its dynamic nature, then only then we can change it by improving the environment or improving other aspects of it. So yeah, I think it may get plateau, it may get to a point that is harder to improve, especially for the 15% that's always active, always running, always wearing Fitbits. So those people, they're already great on wellness. I guess it's time for the majority of the public to catch up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Mary, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you for our presenters. We will now move into breakouts again. This will happen in the same way as before. You'll be in new mixed groups. You'll have a scribe with you. You'll do your quick one neck breath introductions. Hi, I'm Henry. I live in St. Petersburg, Florida. I'm a creativity facilitator with no innovation. You'll discuss any new thinking you have around challenges or gaps, and your scribe will capture those top 5 or so on Post-its, 1 per Post-it to the challenges and gaps page. Again, we'll have about 30 minutes before we pull you back to plenary. And if we are all set and there's full understanding, and Malachi, are we ready?
Yes, we're good to go.
Okay, we will send everyone into breakouts.
Nice discussions,
right.
everyone.
See you soon. I just sent out all of the organizing team also.
On our Challenge and Gaps page. We have a break built in at this time, but before you leave, we have a few things that we would like to share with you. The first being that we have opened up our volunteer signups page. Woohoo! We are going to be asking for volunteers to please join us at the end of the day to help us.
Anne-Marie, we currently have about 28 people in. The number's going up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were all
Yeah.
here. I will pause.
You're a little fast.
Thank you. Will you let me know when you see the breakout rooms are closed?
They've officially closed.
Okay, sorry about that. For the 28 people that were here, just pretend you didn't hear anything before and I will start over. We're about to go into a break, but before we have that break, we have just a few things that we'd like to touch on with everyone. The first thing is our volunteer signups. We've opened up the volunteer signups page in KaiStorm. It's right under Challenges and Gaps. We are going to be asking for volunteers at the end of the day to help us with a couple of key tasks, and we promise to try and not take up too much of your time. But after our close, we'll be inviting volunteers to join us to help us converge on the challenge categories that we'll be coming up with after our break, and as also to help us tag our challenges and gaps for urgency and importance. These two tasks will really help us as we move into day 2 and finalizing our challenge categories and the challenges that we want to focus on in day 2. Signups, when you come to this page, this person with the check mark, and if you check that and click to sign up, your name will appear and we will be able to see that you would like to join us at 2 p.m. Eastern time as volunteers. You get lots of extra points for this. With that, I will pass it to Maggie to send us into break.
I will. There's a quick question in the chat, and it's just how much time for the volunteers. And so it might be for some people an extra half an hour or an extra 45 minutes, I think, probably. Would you say, Anne-Marie? Is that it? Okay. Well invested time to help move the workshop forward and be productive tomorrow. It is time for a break. So we'd like to ask you, if you would, please stay in the Zoom. Do not leave this meeting. You can just mute and close your camera. But I also advise you, please don't go check your email and get involved in something else. Take a break, go look out the window, get a glass of water, stretch your legs, go outside and get some fresh air if you can. It will really help you to feel more productive when you return. And we ask you to please come back at 6:40, whatever your time zone is, 20 minutes before the next hour. See you soon.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back from break. We'll give everyone just another minute.
Love it. People come back and turn their cameras on so we can see for sure that they're back. And again, that feeling like we're in a room with people, it helps when the cameras are there and people are moving. I see some people doing calisthenics. So.
Good idea. Yes, Julia has got the stretching going. Just a couple of quick reminders before I pass it over to our next speaker, Dr. Joe Allen. Please visit his speaker page in KaiStorm to leave your questions for Q&A. And with that, I will pass it to Dr. Joseph Allen, the Associate Professor of Exposure Assessment Science and Environmental Health at Harvard.
All right, thanks. So thanks for the invitation, and it's good to see some folks I know and looking forward to meeting some others here. So on these two big questions, I'll try to use my time efficiently here on defining well-being in the built environment and also key challenges to adoption of this. I'll start the first one on definitions of well-being. These old definitions of health as absence of disease or infirmity, right, are being replaced by newer ones that appropriately capture well-being, health promotion, mental health, equity. It's a real move from pathogenesis to salutogenesis. And it represents a real fundamental shift in then what that means for the built environment. Right now, the entire world is focused on disease avoidance, as expected. But with that shift and greater awareness of disease avoidance is this newfound appreciation, I think changed expectations for what the built environment can and not only can deliver, but should deliver. I think important on this definitional is changing the language. The language that we use matters. And here we want to learn from or co-opt some language that the business community uses. Every business talks about key performance indicators or KPIs. In the words of the famous management expert, Peter Drucker, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So businesses track this. Well, we put forward a framework that builds and kind of uses that language. Instead of KPIs, we like HPIs for health performance indicators. Just, you know, what gets measured gets managed. And in this case, we want to highlight that the most key performance indicator is health. And we put together this framework and have talked about this over the years, and essentially thinking about this in a 2x2 grid with both leading and lagging indicators, right? Businesses track leading indicators, but also lagging indicators. And for us, we're interested in human health, well-being, thriving, flourishing. But importantly, this is the part that gets overlooked often, the built environment is what's driving human health, performance, productivity, and well-being. So a focus on HPIs that focus on the built environment of buildings are actually indicators of population and individual health. On the question of key challenges, I think there are a couple that we need to address. First, I think we need to put buildings front and center in this conversation of human health. It's been missing. You talk about the current crisis, okay? People have recognized that the #1 risk factor for COVID-19 is time indoors. No masks, low to no ventilation. So the building matters. We've known this for a long time. It's taken CDC, WHO, and others a long time to come along to that. The building has mattered since day one of this pandemic. The problem is that buildings are often an afterthought when we think about human health. So, of course, that's too often cited now, stat on how much time we spend indoors. But the reality is, if you look at all of the if you look at what underpins society's knowledge of what drives human health or what constitutes healthy living, everyone gives the same answers. Physical activity, got to eat well, get good rest, air pollution's bad for us, don't smoke. Okay, how do we know those things? They're all derived from human epidemiological cohort studies, Framingham Heart Study, Nurses Health Study, Harvard 6 Cities Air Pollution Study. None of those talk about the building. So key challenge #1 is we don't have the great human epidemiological long-term cohort studies of health in buildings. We don't. Our team just finished one we call the Global Cog Effect Study, maybe one of the biggest I know, 450 people, 6 or 7 different countries, right? But even then, that's nothing compared to the great epi studies that have been done. So it's this glaring hole, and we need to correct that. And placing buildings at the center of our understanding of health also is important in terms of the climate conversation. Buildings consume 40% of global energy. If we combine this, health indoors, we spend all of our time indoors, impacts on disease avoidance, but also health promotion, and the connection beyond the 4 walls of the building, the connection to health beyond the 4 walls of the building, it's clear buildings play a central role in our health. I don't think that's well known or accepted by the vast majority of the public. And so we need to do a better job of communicating that. 2, in terms of key challenges, we've been designing for minimum standards for too long. This is across everything. Certainly air quality, and I've been clear in my opinion for a long time that ASHRAE has not done enough here, producing bare minimum standards that are not designed for health. They've argued internally about whether some of these standards are health-based or not. Currently, they say it's health. I think objectively, they're not health-based standards. We need to change this and flip this from bare minimum, because this is what gets adopted and codified in building codes everywhere. And we need to change that. It extends beyond ASHRAE and ventilation. We designed to bare minimums for lighting. We designed to bare minimums for acoustics and water quality. That's a mistake. We've been in the sick building era, and I think we have a moment here to correct that. The whole world is paying attention to buildings. It might be our one moment to say, hey, there's a lot more here than COVID-19. And in fact, as plexiglass goes away, it never should have been in place anyway, but as plexiglass goes away, there are things that should stay. And we should be pushing above these minimum standards. The third challenge is something that I wrote with Michael Waring, a colleague of mine, in an editorial in a journal back in December 2019, ahead of the pandemic, talking about a healthy buildings research strategy for all. So this is the focus on equity. It's the most important aspect of the healthy building movement, is to be sure that it applies and benefits everyone everywhere. This movement, and this movement towards health and well-being in the built environment, will be a gross failing if it's confined to the brand new, beautiful building, skyscraper going up downtown in our biggest and best cities. And so we must play an important role. In fact, we have a responsibility to be sure that we're creating studies and that lead to application of healthy building principles that include globally diverse buildings and exposures, that include races and ethnicities that have been historically underrepresented in this research. We need studies that focus on the unique needs, physiology, and preferences of women. And we need to explore the entirety of the life course, from reproduction, including preconception, through advanced aging. I'll stop there, and I'm looking forward to the conversations. Thanks.
Joe, thank you so much. You raised very important points, and we have a number of questions. So I'll start with one of them. Do we know enough to generate the well-being KPI, and as you call them, HPI, for the built environment?
Absolutely. I'd say we've known for a long time. I think we've overcomplicated what it takes to produce a healthy building, what it means to be a healthy building. The science is all there, decades of research, long before I was in this field. It's existed for a long time. I like to think we've contributed to it. But I think what's happened is that a lot of that information has stayed stuck in scientific journals. It shouldn't be the case that you have an entire business community that's confused about what it takes, what the science says about health in the built environment. That's still the case. I conversations every single day where you hear that confusion. That means we've failed in a large part to communicate all the richness of information that's available decades deep to help inform decision-making in the real world. And so I think it's incumbent upon all of us to do that work, is to continue to communicate effectively. We do know what it takes. Now, do we know everything? No, science is constantly evolving. And I think this is another key aspect of this movement, is that it has to be flexible and dynamic. Certainly we're doing things wrong today we don't know about. It's been true throughout history. And so we have to be able to say, well, what does the leading science say, and adapt and be flexible.
Great. Another question. How much contribution can built environment make compared to others, such as employment?
In terms of health and well-being, I think it has, it's an impact that's often hidden, right? And so, the connection between our decision-making in terms of the products we put into our buildings, the materials we choose to build with, the embodied carbon in materials, the energy consumption, on-site fossil fuel use, all of these factors are influencing our health. It has immediate acute impacts. There are effects that manifest chronically over time. So this has a bigger, as big an impact as anything else in our lives. I mean, of course, these are the places where we're spending all of our time, and we ignore that impact. And I think a lot of this goes back to my opening, one of my key challenges about the lack of data on long-term studies in this space, right? There's nothing that we know. If I eat too much red meat, that's associated with heart disease. That's well established, right? Tell me, if we're saying indoor air quality is associated with name a health effect, cognitive function in our work. Well, I have to go find, the handful of a couple dozen experts around the world, piece together 4 or 5 different studies and blast this out. And we don't have that, we can't point to that, 100,000 person study. So I'd like to see a lot more of the built environment included in these great big cohort studies we have.
Thank you, Joe. There's one question for the audience. I'm sure they know, but Joe is the co-author of the book titled Healthy Buildings. And this is, Joe, related to your book. It says, your book is critical of post-occupancy evaluations. Can you suggest alternative means to collect qualitative and subjective data to measure well-being in buildings?
Yeah, that's great that you brought up, and we are not nice about it. The post-occupant surveys, the POS has another acronym for something else. I think they're often misused, and I think it comes down to, as we describe in the book, fundamental misunderstandings of basics of epidemiological study design and bias. And there's something called dependent measurement error we won't get into right now, but I'll simplify it and say this. If you have a measurement device, like a post-occupancy survey, and you're asking in that same device about an exposure and an outcome, your results will be biased simply because what you're testing is whether or not people are stoics or complainers. And I'll explain that. If you ask me, I'll be the complainer. How's the air quality in here? It's bad. Do I have a headache? Yep. I'm annoyed. All right, I'm the complainer. I ask, I don't know, someone else, Piers. See Piers out there. Dr. McNaughton, he's happy, right, all the time. Great guy, always happy, have a headache, never, he feels great. Air quality's on, the lighting is good in his space. So, all right, so Piers and I are on opposite poles. We throw together regression, and wow, you can make any relationship appear. In fact, we've seen spurious relations presented like this all the time. Links between, I don't know, acoustics and length of commute and ridiculous things that couldn't possibly be related, but it's a function of that dependent measurement error from a POS, or a post-occupancy survey. Now, the way to break it up is you can do repeat measures. So you start to say, so if you repeat these, then you start to say, oh, well, Piers is always here. We'll account for that. Joe's always here. We'll account for that. And you can start to see the real signal. Second, you can disentangle that by having an objective measure on either side. Objective measure on the exposure side, measure lighting, measure air quality. Then it's not biased in terms of the person's even self-report. So it's just something you have to be careful about. I see a lot of firms do this and put out what are really spurious relationships that are just a problem of the misunderstanding the methods and how to introduce information bias into study design and how to avoid it. So there's more that I'm not trying to sell a book. If you want to get into that topic, we spend some time on it because it's clearly a pet peeve of mine.
And it relates directly to the conversation here as well, the measurement methods. So maybe one last question, and it's related to the pandemic era we're all in. Why did it take the CDC so long to acknowledge the airborne risk of COVID in buildings? Is this a failure of building science communication?
Sure, I think we should take some blame. We tried our best. 33 or 34 op-eds in every major newspaper going back to last February. Every single one mentions ventilation, filtration, airborne transmission. Colleagues, Rich Corsi, Lindsay Marr, Shelley, people have been writing about this, trying to raise attention. Why did it not take hold? A couple things. One is, let's be blunt, the gross failure of the prior administration to acknowledge and take this seriously and even influence CDC communication. That's where this all stems from. Outside of that, we have historical problems that the medical community or the building science community, I'll blame it on us, not doing enough to embed ourselves in the conversations in the medical community. Epidemiology, great. All these skills matter. Medicine, great. Tell me how many building scientists are involved in the early outbreaks investigations? None. And so the building science group needs to be more deeply embedded in the epidemiology space, infectious disease epidemiology space. Third, there's a mistake in the medical textbooks that goes back decades. saying that ignores basic aerosol physics. They say respiratory droplets in the 5-micron range will drop out of the air in 6 feet. That's where the 6-foot, 2-meter rule comes from. That's wrong. A 5-micron particle will travel beyond 6 feet and stay aloft for 30 minutes or more. They're coming around to that. We interviewed Dr. Fauci about this in July and August, and they came around to it. He returned to Harvard Medical School the next month in September and said, you know what, we've been underestimating aerosol transmission. We've had the definition wrong. Unfortunately, that was 9 months after the pandemic started. So some of this is, the siloing, errors, basic errors, and failure to incorporate, new science into our understanding of airborne transmission, a totally inept prior administration that didn't take this seriously in the United States, all contributed. The current CDC now acknowledges airborne transmission, has a great website up on ventilation. They've adopted all the ASHRAE language. So we've seen big improvements. Just the downside is that it just took a long time.
Thank you so much, Joe. I think we could all stay here and discuss these great questions and your answers, but I think we're up with our time. Anne-Marie, back to you.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Burton. Before we move into our next breakout, which will be a slightly different goal than our last two, we'd like to invite you to individually capture any new thinking you have around gaps or challenges. This is our last time that we're going to capture gaps and challenges on the challenges, the yellow challenges page. We invite you to peruse through them and make sure we're not adding duplicates. But we'll take a couple minutes now to add any of those last challenges, any of that new thinking after Joe's presentation. As we get ready to move into our next breakouts, Malachi is going, or I can do it actually before. We'll be turning on a new page that we'll be working in KaiStorm. But Maggie, will you share slides for us? Okay, thank you. This next breakout is going to be a little bit different. Again, you'll be in new mixed groups with new people, so do those quick one-breath introductions to meet everyone. And then go ahead and review together the gaps and challenges that we've identified throughout the day. The gaps and challenges page will be indexed on the categories page that we'll be working in. So you can review those together and discuss the top 6 categories that you see emerging. How might we make sense of these gaps and challenges? What are the categories we see emerging? So we're no longer capturing new gaps and challenges, but we're looking at what are the buckets that we might organize these challenges into. And we're looking to create headlines for those buckets.
I like this picture to think about it. Like, we talked earlier about how we're getting ready to make a roadmap. This workshop is creating the blueprint for the roadmap. And yet the blueprint has to have sort of like a strategy to it. Like, and often people use this metaphor of pillars. What are the strategic pillars? So you might think of the categories as sort of, what are the pillars that would be important milestones or important areas that need to be, not even milestones, important areas that need to be cultivated and developed on this roadmap that you're creating. So if you think about the categories are on the blueprint for the roadmap, those are the pillars that we need to look through to see the roadmap that we're going to make.
So again, we'll have those quick one-breath introductions. We'll review the gaps and challenges that we have identified so far, and then we'll make sense of these. What are the categories we see emerging? And if we were to organize these challenges into buckets or the pillars of a strategy, what might the headlines be? And we've put a couple of examples on the categories page where we will be capturing these. A couple things to note, just like before for our scribes, 1 per post-it for the headlines. And these aren't full sentences or multiple sentences. We're really looking for a headline. And some examples include, oh, we went back a slide. Thank you. Some examples include difficulties in data collection or lack of consensus on measurements. And I'm sure we'll come up with more in our groups. Does everyone understand our next breakout? All right.
Seeing lots of head nods. Thank you.
Yes. So again, we'll be capturing on the categories page, and we will have about 30 minutes or so for this breakout as well. Malachi, how are we looking on breakouts?
Breakouts look good.
Okay, with that, we will send you into your breakouts. Again, we're looking for those top 6 headlines, and we will see you all in about 30 or so minutes.
Have fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope that those were rich discussions. I expect they were. I actually snuck into some of your rooms to listen in, and I thought that there was an interesting exchange, and really want to appreciate again the scribes for the work they did to help capture the insights that came out of there. And thank you all for your work and your thinking. Let's do another poll. We started with one. We wanted to know what were the 3 words that you would think of to describe well-being in the built environment. And we wonder, has it changed? Has it changed because of the presentations that you've heard or the discussions you've had? So there is another poll, very similar one, recognizable but different. The link is in the chat. Please, if you would click through and take just a minute or 2 to tell us what 3 words now. Maybe it's the same 3 words, that's okay. Maybe some of them are different, but we're curious. And tomorrow we'll do a little comparison to see how our idea of keywords for well-being in the built environment changed over the course of the day today. I'll give you another moment to do that. All right. Has everybody had a chance to do it? Let's see some head nodding. This is the hardest part of our virtuals. We don't get to read your body language, so I'm always scrolling through and I'm appreciative of people who are smiling back and nodding their head, so we know that they've done the task. Anne-Marie.
Thank you, Maggie, and thank you for participating in that second poll. What's ahead? We're nearing the end of today's workshop. Thank you for all your hard work today. I'm going to appeal one more time for volunteers to join us at the close of the event. We will meet and just brief you on the asks that we have. Malachi is currently pulling you to the volunteer page. So when it says fancy seeing you here, that's us being a little bit funny because we've pulled you to that page, and the hopes that you will sign up to help us in the task and challenge of narrowing in on these challenge categories that we've come up with together, so that we know which ones we want to work in tomorrow, as well as tagging these challenges and gaps for importance and urgency. And that will also be a big help for us tomorrow. Tomorrow, we will review and work together in mixed groups to come to shared definitions. We'll match categories and gaps together, and we'll prioritize those gaps and challenges. So we'll be mixing again in lots of breakout groups and working to narrow in on that blueprint for our roadmap of our challenges for IN2WIBE to address in the future. Up next, we will be moving into our Wonder networking event. This will be an opportunity to chat with our speakers a little bit more. I think one of them had to leave, but as you can see on this slide, the Wonder Room will have room areas designated for each of them. When you arrive in Wonder, Malachi is pulling you to that page now as well. When you arrive in Wonder, you'll have a little circular icon that you can move around. I recommend using, as Maggie is showing, you can click or you can use the arrow keys on your keyboard to move into those rooms. It's not pictured here, but Malachi will be in the help desk area. So when you zoom out of the Wonder Room, you'll be able to see that. And if you do need any help, you can find him there. Before you move into Wonder, please note that the platform works best from either Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge. It does not support Safari, Firefox, or mobile devices. So please be on a computer and use Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge. This is an opportunity to look back at those speaker questions that we may not have had a chance to ask, and to just have a more informal discussion with our speakers before our close. Are there any?
Just add, Anne-Marie, when you go into the Wonder Room, go up and look in the left-hand corner for this little plus and minus bar. And if you hit on the minus bar, it will zoom back out so you can get a feeling for all of the rooms that are available to you. Sometimes when you go in, you're a little bit close, you might not see that.
Yes.
And can you move around to different rooms?
Yes, you can move your icon, and when your icon goes up to another circle, you'll be able to see those people and to chat with them. We will have our organizing team and our moderators in there they've all buzzed around in Wonder Room before today, so they will be able to help as well. With that, I'll pass it for any quick closing remarks from Zhang.
Yeah, thank you, all of you, for this wonderful contribution. I was in a few of the breakout rooms. The discussions were very good, informative. I hope all of you can rejoin us tomorrow morning. I think tomorrow we start at 10 a.m. Eastern time again. We will have some activity as we just mentioned, and then we're looking forward to see you tomorrow again.